Hi, welcome everybody. My name is Paola Boucher. I'm the Senior Program Coordinator at the Texas Language Center, and we're here very excited to give a welcome to Tracy Mann for her talk, Living in a Second Language. I have a couple of announcements that I want to make first. Today in the afternoon, there's also another cool event if you're interested in attending Japanese calligraphy lesson in Parlin. Just put it out there. And then on March 25th, we have our last Language Matters series speaker, and is our own director, who is retiring at the end of the semester, so it's his last talk, and it's A Classroom with a View, 35 Years of Languages and Cultures and UT Austin. It's going to be a critical retrospective of how the teaching of world languages at UT has survived changes in administrations, financial crisis, curriculum reforms, and shifting priority over 3 decades. So it is really not to miss one. It's going to be fun. I am going to now introduce Tracy. She is a New Yorker that attended the Seminario de Música of Universidade Federal da Bahia and the Berklee College of Music. She has written English versions of the lyric songs of Gilberto Gil, Caetano Veloso, Milton Nascimento, and Javan, among others for U.S. recordings. Several of these albums have received Grammy Awards. Tracy has worked as music publicist for the U.S. tours and album releases of Brazilian Gilberto Gil, Maria Rita, Zéu Jorge, Bebel Gilberto, as well as for artists from a host of foreign countries. She has been the representative for South by Southwest in Brazil since 2012, and she is fluent in Portuguese and is working on her Italian. So please give a round of applause for Tracy.
Thank you so much, Paola, for the invitation today. It's really exciting to be here at UT. It's an honor, really. And I also want to thank Vivian Flanzer, the chair of the UT Portuguese Language Department, for helping to make this work out for today. And I'm very happy that we're in an informal setting because I do have a talk prepared and I have slides, but I really enjoy speaking informally. I have some questions during this talk that I've prepared to throw at you. And if you feel like answering them, great. And if not, we'll just keep going. But I'm as interested in how you live in a second language as much as I am interested in telling you my story and the story of other people who also live in second and third languages. I'm really interested at why we want to learn language, and what's our motivation, and where learning those languages can take us. I'm going to ask you about your own experience, of course, and then address the elephant in the room. Why study a foreign language at all if AI can do all the hard work for us? I'm living in my second language right now, even though I'm speaking to you in English. How can that be? Well, I'm here at the University of Texas in Austin because I'm fluent in Portuguese, and that fluency has opened the doors to a wealth of unimagined opportunities. I live in New York, and I work for South by Southwest since 2000. And in the past 14 years, I've been the ambassador, they call me, the Brazilians call me, of Brazil, which has been the largest international delegation. In fact, this year it is way beyond in size all of the other international delegations that South by gets, which is about 100 countries represented. So if you come downtown later this week, you will hear so much Portuguese in Austin that you will think the Brazilians have staged some kind of takeover. So I'm guessing that you're all studying language. I don't really need to ask you this question. I don't know if you feel like you're at the place where you're already speaking it, but you're already into it at least, right? Mentally, and you're in the practice of it. And as I said, I'm interested in why, because I don't believe that people who are good at languages are part of an elite that have a special natural affinity. Mastering a language is hard for almost anyone. It's humbling and it's embarrassing at times. When I was first learning Portuguese, and I wasn't quite hearing all of the syllables of the words, I would make switches, like I would hear, I would say lençol, which is a word for bed sheets, when I wanted a Kleenex. That's lenço. And I also thought I was being cool by parroting a swear word that I had heard, which was, the word is caralho, but I heard cara. So I would go around and say cara, 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 thinking I was really smart. And people would look at me like, what the heck are you talking about? Being cool was really my motivation for learning Portuguese, because I was 17 years old. I had been turned down by several colleges and universities for admission because of my age. And one guy at Hampshire College actually told me that I didn't have enough life experience to enter college. So I got really angry, and I thought, I'm going to show this guy, this one poor guy, wherever he may be now, from Hampshire College. He changed my life because I was trying to think, okay, what can I do? The coolest people I knew in my town were foreign exchange students that had come in to, they would cycle in every year. They had the best clothes. They had these cool accents. Everybody wanted to hang out with them. And that seemed to me like maybe that could work, my big plan to get into college, right? So I signed up for all the foreign exchange programs I could. And finally, I got in on a wait list at the Rotary Club. And when I went to the orientation meeting, which included the kids that were on wait list, I heard a guy in the back of the room say, any kid that picks Brazil is in. So I thought, okay, Brazil, foreign language, exotic country. That could be good. That would make a very interesting story. So back in the 70s, and here you'll see, I started keeping a journal, even though I didn't write Portuguese that well. And if you look carefully, you'll see errors in my Portuguese. But I thought, by writing it, that would kind of help me. Because, of course, in the 70s, we had no technological tools to help. We had no computer, no internet, no Google Translate, just some chunky dictionaries a teenager wouldn't be caught dead toting around. And even those were limited in helping to understand idiomatic phrases and slang words. And there was a group of guys we would go out for pizza with that would talk as fast as they could using every bit of slang they could that they knew would go over my head, just to watch me kind of fumble around, and they could get a laugh out of it. And I would be like, kind of going along with it because I really wanted to fit in. I was really trying hard. Eventually, and this is me back in the day, right? Eventually, the mother of a school friend of mine offered to tutor me, and she listened to me as I would try to put sentences together. She corrected me. She explained some of the basic rules of grammar and structure. And then I traveled to Bahia. And in Bahia, nobody spoke English. And not only did they not speak English, but they had their own accent and their own kind of lexicon that was very different from São Paulo. And there was really nobody there to kind of orient me, so I had to figure it out on my own. And luckily, the people who welcomed me in Bahia were really amazing. They were kind, they were patient. Through trial and error, my basic need to communicate eventually drove me to master Portuguese. I memorized song lyrics and scraps of poetry. I watched and listened and asked questions when I didn't understand. I joined the family on the couch to watch the Globo soap operas every evening. The sensation of crossing over from constantly translating in my head to understanding the language on its own terms was as if something amazing had exploded in my brain. This is the family that welcomed me in Bahia in 1974. And this is them in a photo from 2019. They're from the interior of Bahia, the Sertão, and they now live in Salvador. 12 brothers and sisters of my generation, and then the many generations that have come after. In the end, I learned Portuguese because I came to love Brazil and to love the people who had welcomed me with such warmth. And I regret at times, and I'm envious of you, of studying it academically. I don't have that background, and I read Portuguese language literature slowly. I'm trying to read more and more, and I constantly find errors in my written language. I write a lot in Portuguese for my job at South by Southwest. My daughter, who's a professor of Portuguese at University of North Carolina, will gently correct me when I use the wrong tense or gender. She's helping me, let's say, professionalize my Portuguese. But I feel I know the language in a very profound way. And it's something that allows me to move through the world on my own and feel that I can be comfortable anywhere I go. And it's really given me an exceptional life. In the years that followed my student abroad experience, I became a music publicist in Los Angeles. And my fluency in Portuguese allowed me to work with some of Brazil's biggest musical acts. And this is, of course, my beloved Gilberto Gil. This is a recent picture, a little show he did in São Paulo. But of course, I met him generations ago when he was a young man. And I also, as Paula mentioned, I wrote English lyrics for Brazilian songs. After more than a decade with South by Southwest as a music publicist, I was offered a step up there to develop sales in Brazil, which to me is really community building. And my frequent trips to Brazil have allowed me to connect with people that I met over 50 years ago, and also with new people and new innovators and new creative people. And this place is so exciting. The Vale do Linde Accelerator in Salvador is the first all-Black accelerator in Brazil. All people who are descendants of the African diaspora there. And they are finally getting government support and other kinds of support for really amazing, creative, new businesses, not, as the name might indicate, so technology focused, but more culture focused. And they're doing some really fantastic things. So I presume, and correct me if I'm wrong, that aside from the folks on the side of the table, did you learn a second language at home? Did anybody come up with a second language? You did. And what was your language? Yeah. Okay, great. So I always thought that people who grew up in a second language would have it easier than those of us who have to figure our way out of English from scratch. And a conversation with my niece, Cecilia, made me rethink that notion. Celia Taim is a 35-year-old humanitarian aid worker who spent most of her career living and working in sub-Saharan Africa. She's covered the Central African Republic, Congo, Chad, Ethiopia, and now Sudan. She travels from Africa to Europe to Washington, D.C., advocating for success to basic health care and nutrition. Her work is intense. In compensation, her job provides her with regular holiday breaks to places like Zanzibar and Greece, and she lives in an apartment in Nairobi courtesy of her employer. Cecilia's mom is Swiss German, and she learned German as a second language at home. Her dad, my brother, learned German when he fell in love with her mom. And her mother also speaks French. So Cecilia, who was very ambitious to get back to Europe and go to university there, applied to do her undergraduate degree in international affairs at the University of Geneva. And she failed that first year because the French that she learned at home in conversation with family members was not sufficient to complete her coursework. She had to go through that same arduous process of the rest of us of acquiring a language through study, repetition, fail, repeat. But she graduated at the top of her class. Cecilia doesn't use German in her work, and she only speaks French when she's on assignment in West Africa. She's currently working towards a functional fluency in Kiswahili, a Bantu language that serves as the major lingua franca for over 100 million people across East and Central Africa. And she wants to learn Arabic, too, in order to make deeper connections with the Muslim Sudanese population with whom she works. As the international development field faces sweeping changes, she's now contemplating a life in Africa as a beachside innkeeper where all the languages she knows, this is the beach, all the languages she knows will make her an exemplary host to guests from all over the world. In Cecilia's case, and it may be true for you, a second language in the home was a jumpstart to a life lived in multiple languages. For others, the journey to a second language is rooted in history. Formula One is a sport rooted in English. The first Grand Prix race was held in Silverstone, England on May 13th, 1950. And a week later, Ferrari entered the next race, which was in Monte Carlo. Ferrari is the only team that has competed in every Formula One, and early training for the drivers in karting and feeding is all done in Italy. Even though most of the cars are manufactured in England, drivers describe knowing Italian as key to developing trust with the many Italian designers, technical specialists, and strategists who are embedded in the teams across the sport. Whether a driver has done a stint with the Italians or not, Italian has become the unofficial language, second language of race driving and motorsport. So one of my all-time heroes, Sir Lewis Hamilton, 7-time world champion Formula One, last year joined the Ferrari team. And although Lewis had never learned a second language, he's British, obviously, he dedicated himself to learning Italian so he could fit in with the culture of the Ferrari team. And in researching this, I discovered that a video clip titled "Proof That Formula One's Native Language is Italian." And in it, you see several well-known drivers speaking a few words of Italian, and many of them, especially the Spanish and German drivers, are really kind of impressive. Lewis, however, was using his phone. He was reading off a phone. And, you know, he's admitted it's been a hard process. He's still learning. But what I love with this comment from Reddit, and here's, this is the important point I want to make for you, is that it's the thought that counts. Your intention behind the language, your desire to communicate, regardless of whether you have all the words, regardless of whether you know how to put the sentences together, that is really going to mean a lot to the people that you're trying to connect with. And as you'll see, that's kind of a theme of this talk. I really feel that if language is about human connection, and that's why we're doing this, and that's where we eventually want to get. So my partner, Mark Gartenberg, also learned Italy from a place of history. When his mother died in 1998, it became important to him to connect with the family's roots in Sicily. His grandmother spoke Sicilian, some Italian, broken English, but his mother never passed the language on. So he began with language tapes and Italian movies, and eventually, as I had done in Brazil, he realized he needed to start taking some real classes. He's a former musician who understands the rhythm of practice, and he studied with tapes every day for 2 years to reinforce what he was learning in the classroom. Mark's ability in Italian led him to promote some of Italy's biggest pop stars in the U.S. and Latin America. This is Lorenzo Cherubini Giovanotti and Carmen Consoli, and they're really huge stars in the Italian music world. And he received recognition from the Italian music industry for the new markets that he was able to open up for these folks. On his first visit to Sicily to visit his family, they were amazed that he could communicate with them. And this is only learning Italian. I mean, he managed to get by with some of the Sicilian as well, which was really fantastic. How long has it taken you to get to a place of mastery in your second language? Do you feel, I don't want to suggest that you're already there. Do you feel like you're on your way? Are you there? How's it going? Where are you at in the journey?
Oh, okay. So I'm like currently, so I grew up in a Spanish speaking household. My family's Mexican. So like a lot of people, everybody in my house like was just learning English when like I was born. So I grew up literally just like people speaking Spanish around me, but I still didn't like learn Spanish. Like the only language I could speak now is English, but I am learning now. Like I'm taking like a Spanish class, and then I practice outside of class. So I feel like I'm getting there. It's easier. It's like easier to communicate with my like grandparents, especially. So yeah.
Why? Because they're more patient. The language is more simple. What's the plus there?
To learn Spanish?
Yeah, as far as talking with the grandparents, let's say, versus, your peers who speak Spanish, or is there something about the way that they speak or the way that they listen to you, or what happens there?
Yeah, probably the way that like my grandparents listen to me. They're really patient. So like if I say something wrong, like my grandma would just be like, "Oh, what? You're trying to say this, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm trying to say that." She's like, "Oh," and she gives me examples of how to say it, like what sentences to use it in. So
I think the people that love us are really the best teachers in a way. It's so great. So Mandarin is actually a language that really fascinates me. I haven't learned it. I probably won't in this lifetime, but I would have, because back in college I had a friend who would try to explain the different pronunciations of the same word to me based on the diacritical marks. And he would pronounce each syllable. It sounded like music to me, the differences, the subtle differences in the tonality, very strange and beautiful and kind of appealing. And I was interested to learn more about the kinds of Americans that learn Mandarin. The first story I found was about a little girl, 11-year-old, who goes to this school in Washington, D.C., the Yu Ying public charter school, which they start with an immersion of kids at pre-K 3, and it goes till 5th grade. And this school is wildly popular, apparently, even though the number of students studying Mandarin in the U.S. has dropped dramatically since the Obama years. This school's still doing well. And Francesca says it's not just about increasing academic excellence or providing pathways. I'm saying it's not just, she didn't say this. It's not just about increasing academic excellence or providing pathways to lucrative careers. What Francesca says is that Mandarin is a tool for thinking creatively and for traveling. It's a way of dreaming big about where she wants to go in the world. Jesse's story reminded me a little bit of my own, in that he threw himself into something completely unprepared for surprising results. He traveled to China for his junior year abroad without any fluency in Mandarin. and his first taste of China got him hooked. So he went back, he did an immersive program, and he was awarded a Fulbright to study comedy, the art of Chinese comedy. And he found a mentor there who was a very well-known performer of a particular style of Chinese comedy that's a combination of scripted and improvised sketches. And he was able to build on that and develop it. And he became one of the first comics in China to popularize stand-up. So he built on those kind of traditions, and he used his own experience in American stand-up to create a new art form in China. And by the time he returned to the United States, a decade later, he'd become a fixture of China's burgeoning stand-up comedy scene. And now he has over 1 million followers on Douyin, which is China's domestic version of TikTok, because he bridged the gap between American style and the traditional forms of Chinese performance. When the U.S. threatened to shut down TikTok, Americans flocked to the Chinese e-commerce app known as Red Note as a possible substitute. Duolingo saw an increase of 216% in interest in Mandarin, as Americans rushed to learn enough of the language to be able to monetize this platform. So it's not news that Mandarin is a desirable skill in technology. New hires in Meta's AI division are often told jokingly that there are 2 languages they need to know. The first is Hack, which is Meta's proprietary language, and the second is Mandarin. But it's not just about the language. It's about the personal connections and the pathways to make for deeper understanding for Westerners to understand how the Chinese think, their long-term, relational, non-confrontational mindset. And more, Mandarin looks like an essential tool for navigating this very complicated 21st century. Now, I'm figuring you both studied Spanish because it came from history, it came from a place of family, right? And you liked Portuguese because of the musical sounds, which I think is fantastic. Do you want to say anything more about what drew you to it?
I knew that I wanted to study another language. Well, I mean, it's a requirement, but I also wanted to. I don't know, studying on my own, it was never great for me because I didn't have the self-discipline to keep at that. And I was having a hard time picking. I wasn't really sure exactly what to choose. But I had heard a couple of like the more popular songs like Gilberto Gil, Caetano Veloso, and I'd seen a little bit of Brazilian culture and I thought it looked really cool. And I thought Portuguese looked really cool. And I thought maybe if I learned how to speak that, it could broaden my worldview a little bit and get a different perspective on life.
That's fantastic. Do you want to say anything about learning Spanish? I mean, did you feel at any moment that because you had Spanish at home, maybe you'd try something else, or how did that work?
I'm not currently studying a language, but I am practicing my Spanish a lot, especially since I've moved out and I don't live with my parents anymore. I really just want to like make sure I don't lose it because it, as you said, it's about connections. I'm a STEM major, so I did a lot of like shadowing, and every time I would shadow, whether like a PT clinic or a hospital, I always found myself translating and like these like, you know, medical procedures and exercises and stuff like that. And at the end, it would always consist of like, thank you. Like one person was like, you're like an angel sent today. I didn't know what I was going to do today because, you know, my insurance was about to expire or something like that. So, yeah, it's pretty much.
You just covered a whole area of my talk. Thank you. Way to go. No, it's great. It's great. I'm glad that came up. Actually, I'm going to go right into the part about medicine and Dr. Paul Farmer. And I don't know if you're acquainted with Dr. Farmer. He was a renowned physician and humanitarian and another one of my personal heroes. While an undergraduate in medical anthropology at Duke University, he befriended the Haitian migrants that were in a labor camp adjacent to the Duke campus. I can't even imagine what that looked like. But anyway, he became quite close to the men that worked there that were working on the harvesting tobacco in North Carolina. So after completing Duke, he went on a volunteer project in Kanje, which is a settlement in the central plateau of Haiti. Medical anthropology was so interesting for me to read about this. It's a subfield of anthropology that draws upon social, cultural, biological, and linguistic anthropology to better understand the factors that influence health and well-being. And I thought this was so interesting. Linguistics, in other words, language, is a critical piece in treating patients effectively. The connections Paul made through his volunteer work in the camp propelled him to travel to Paris for a 6-month immersion course in French before going to Harvard for a medical degree. In Haiti, he founded Partners in Health, which is a global health and social justice nonprofit that is credited for pioneering community-based models for HIV/AIDS and tuberculosis treatment in the poorest places on earth. Dr. Farmer was, you could say, obsessed with bringing quality health care to the poor and forgotten, and that obsession led him to master French and Creole. He used language to build community and trust and solidarity. Do we think he would have been as successful without his ability to understand and communicate with his patients? Partners in Health now reaches across the globe from South America to Africa to Russia. Dr. Farmer not only talked the talk, but he walked the walk by living in these communities alongside of his patients, building profound relationships and speaking their languages. It would be impossible for the doctors at NYU Langone, New York's largest health network, to master the over 800 languages that New Yorkers across the 5 boroughs speak. But in the emergency room, seconds count to treat patients successfully and save lives. So Langone's solution is a mix of technology and human language expertise. Voice, that you're seeing here, is a secure video and remote interpretation service that connects to live language experts in seconds. You could be one of those live experts, see? In the emergency room, when seconds count, the interpreter is virtually in the room with the patient and the doctor, so they're not only hearing the conversation, but they're getting the visual cues, the body language, and all those kind of things that help to provide context to the words that are being spoken and are a key element in creating trust in a setting that's mediated by technology. Obviously, not all of New York's medical personnel live in second languages, although nearly 50% of the city's population does. And here in Texas, it's about 30%. But they understand how communication builds trust, the kind of trust that makes them more successful in treating and healing the patients who come through the doors of their hospitals. Someone's ability in a second language is literally saving lives. So this question you already answered for me because you were creating trust in that medical setting, right? You were in a hospital or clinic, or right? So you've lived that. In the next section of this talk, I'm going to talk about people, relationships, and translation. And interesting is this couple. American man, a Chinese wife, David and Hong, who only communicate via Microsoft Translator. They don't speak each other's languages. They don't have any intention to. And the thing is that the translation technology is still not completely accurate. So, for example, Hong says he pays attention to me. This is interpreted by a human interpreter. He pays attention to all the details and takes good care of me. He really knows and sees what I need. And the machine translation was, he is very attentive. He thought about anything for me. So I was impressed by a lot of his details. So something in that for me missed something critical. He really knows and sees what I need became, he's very attentive. There's something in the richness of the original that got lost in this, for me, you may disagree, in this mediated interpretation. They've been happily married for 3 years, and Hong says that according to Chinese wisdom, 2 people are together because they don't know each other. So the barriers to understanding have enhanced the romantic feeling. But David did say that after a while, when they don't have the heat of that initial passion of a relationship, it's possible that using the translation, and again, they're looking here, well, their partner's talking there, so they don't make that kind of eye-to-eye connection as they're talking. Another couple I found, Seb Capony and Chiara Capony. Chiara is a 32-year-old Filipino artist and entrepreneur, and her husband is a French tennis coach. And when they met, their friends predicted this relationship was doomed, the language barrier would be insurmountable. The cultural differences, too, between a city girl, she's from Manila, and he's from a small alpine town in France, would be insurmountable. When they met in 2017, they didn't have the same kind of translation apps that we had today, not that level of sophistication. But they each spent time in each other's countries and started to gain mastery. Kiara actually learned, she learned French, and Seb learned English because Kiara's day-to-day language in Manila was English. And what they found was that the process of learning the language was actually the blueprint for a successful relationship, because there were barriers, there were problems, there was regrouping, there was a lot of humor. They laughed a lot at each other's attempts to speak and not making it. And in the end, it was this kind of mix of hard work, humor, process, try, don't give up. That was the secret sauce for their intimacy and their fluency. I'd like to know, for you right now in the phase that you're at in your language learning or your language journey, what's the most important thing about it? What does it give you? What does it do for you that is most important to you? You guys didn't know you were going to be on the spot like this, right?
Yeah, the most important thing to me is definitely my relationships. Like I said, like my family, my friendships. Yeah, that's really valuable for why I want to learn a second language.
For me, I like that I get to kind of connect better with a group of people that I would not have before. Like I see videos online and someone starts talking in Portuguese and I don't get all of it, but I get some of it, and it's cool to be able to do that.
Ever since my partner reconnected with this Italian family, I've been studying Italian. And at first I tried to skate by on the Portuguese I had, but it became clear that was not going to work. So I started taking weekly classes, and my challenge is not only to learn Italian, but also to have some understanding of Sicilian, the way it sounds, the dialect, which is different than Italian. And my teacher, which is a young cousin from the family, makes me talk to other people in the family. We do Zoom lessons, and she will bring, the grandmother or the kids, whatever, so that I hear the different people speaking Italian and some Sicilian. So I'm not just relying on how she speaks it. She speaks kind of a classic Italian. And I've tried, she makes me write journal entries, like coming down to South by, she'll ask me to write something about the experience down here this week in Italian. And it's hard, but I like it, I really feel like it's something beautiful to get lost. And Italian, of course, is full of these like double consonants and double vowels. It's musical. It has all the things that I really like. And if you hear me speak in Italian, you'll hear a different Tracy than the Tracy that speaks Portuguese or than the Tracy who speaks English. And these languages allow me to constantly reinvent myself and get a fresh start in each language. As I skimmed through the research on neuroscience of language, and I'm now expert on this subject, and I didn't plan to talk about that today because it's not, plenty of people know a lot more about that than I do. But this phrase really struck me. Learning a new language revamps old modes of thinking to make space for growth, like pruning your brain. It literally refigures your brain. But doesn't it make sense that we want to benefit from a brain upgrade, even if we have to go through some pain to get there? Doesn't it make sense to connect to a world bigger than just the world of our native language and enjoy the freedom and the opportunity that brings? Double Your World was a headline that I read in an article about mastering Japanese. I grew up in an analog era, and I don't have the same digital fluency that you do. So if you can use AI to customize your study of a second language, practice your pronunciation, correct your grammar, that's a plus. But AI alone won't bring you the richness of the human connection, the spark that occurs when you look in someone's face and you recognize that gift of understanding that you are able to create through language. Because of my associations with the musicians who were considered enemies of the state in Brazil at the time I lived there, the government asked me to leave. I had to leave the country. And I stayed away for 25 years. I never considered that knowing Portuguese would get me anywhere beyond maybe at some future point in time I would be able to get a permanent residency and return to Bahia, because that's what I wanted to do. But instead, it turned out to be my calling card into a musical world that spanned Boston, Los Angeles, Brazil, lucrative work as a lyricist, as a music publicist, and now this crazy job that I had with South by Southwest that I basically invented out of my interests and my own passions. And I travel, as I travel the world, this allows me to feel at home wherever I go, knowing that I have the capacity for connection and knowing that it's mastering the language of others is within my grasp. When you're struggling with a subjunctive, or you're trying to get your tongue around some crazy syllable that's unfamiliar, you're watching a foreign film or like those YouTube videos and you're getting only about 25% of what you're seeing, I just want you to know, you will make it on this journey. You will get there. I wish you the same sense of satisfaction and possibility that living in a second language has given me. That's what I wish for you. Thank you so much.
What a wonderful talk. We'll open the microphone for any Q&A, the floor for anybody. Anybody wants to ask a question to Tracy?
You've been such a great audience. Thank you so much. I mean, this is an intimate setting. You're kind of under the spotlight, but I really enjoyed getting to know a little bit about where you're at with language. And I mean, you can see, I'm the biggest advocate for it. It's the greatest door opener of your life. So good for you. Keep going. However you're doing it, just keep going.
Tracy, thank you so much for your talk. It was really beautiful. And I was thinking about what you're saying about connections and love and, the family and how makes this, extra special in learning a language. And you mentioned that your daughter became a Portuguese professor. And I think this is really interesting, right? And do you mind expanding a little bit on her journey and your journey?
It's so funny because I was talking to Paula about this earlier. So my daughter's 36 and she's a professor. She's been a professor at UNC Chapel Hill for the past 5 years, I think. I did not speak Portuguese in the home. I was, most of my daughter's childhood, I was a single mom. I didn't reconnect with working in Brazil till Chloe was probably 11 or 12 years old. Then I started as a publicist doing some work, and eventually by 2003 or 4, I had returned to Brazil, reconnected. But she says there was something in the air. I mean, I would often absentmindedly sing a lot in Portuguese. I don't know. I really don't know what it was. But she signed up for Portuguese classes while she was still in high school. She went to Smith to be in the Portuguese department. That was what she wanted to do. She did a Fulbright there. And the family in Brazil that you saw earlier, she's part of that whole family now. She loves it. She visits them all the time. Something sparked in her. But I honestly don't know what it is, because unlike Paula made a concerted effort to teach her kids Spanish when they were little, and that took to some degree and not to others. I really don't know. Maybe you two know also what has happened, transpired in your household. In the case of a bilingual couple, my brother learned German, he learned French, he learned Italian, and they made a point of always speaking, they spoke German in the house. Even when us, the American relatives would come in, they'd continue speaking German. So it was really a very dominant thing. And all of their kids learned German and are fluent in German now. But I think it kind of varies, from household to household. But Vivian, I would say, let's face it, Portuguese is really a magical language. Maybe it gets into people's heads in a different way than some of the others. Right? That's great. Thank you so much. Really a pleasure for me. Thank you.